Yes, welcome again. We are going to look at the way in which the lesson plan has changed from 844 to CBC. In CBC, we have a different way of lesson preparation. In the lesson plan, first of all, you have to start by writing the name of the school. It's a lesson plan. Then after the name of the school, there is a learning area. Remember, it is no longer called subject. It's a learning area. After the learning area, you go ahead and write the date. That is across. Then after the date, there is time. The time the lesson is expected to take place. And then the grade. Which grade is that? From grade 9 to 12. Which grade is that? Then after that, you indicate the role. That is the number of learners in that given lesson. Then from there, you move to another part that we call the strand. Remember, the topic is currently called strand in CBC. So the strand, you talk about it, and thereafter you write what we call the substrand. The substrand. If, for example, your lesson is you are talking about, maybe the learning area you are taking learners through is social studies. You can take an example. Your lesson, you're going to learn about natural and built environment. That is the strand, and the substrand could be compass direction. That is an example. Then, after the substrand, you move to what we call the specific learning outcomes. In the specific learning outcomes, this is where you write. Initially, it was called the objective. It is now called the specific learning outcomes. Here you start by talking of, by the end of the lesson, what will learners do, or what will they achieve by the end of that given lesson. So after that, you go to another part that we call the learning experience. Under the learning experience, you also talk about the learner is guided to do activity in the learner's book, or to do whatever activity that is given in the learner's book, or according to the guideline that is given. You talk of which activity they are guided to undertake. That is the learning experience. Under the learning experience, you must also consider the fact that learners have got their textbooks. They will be able to refer to given activities that are talked about. And then after the learning experience, there is another part that we call key inquiry question. The key inquiry question is a question that is supposed to guide the facilitator to know what the learners should achieve. In case they answer this question, it means that they will be able to understand that particular lesson. So this is supposed to guide the teacher or the facilitator to understand if learners are understanding whatever strand or substrand that they are going through during that given lesson. After that, there is what we call learning resources. The learning resources include the learner's book. These are the resources that learners are likely to use for the lesson to be successful. And then there is what we call organization of learning. Under the organization of learning, the facilitator should prepare this by talking of where the lesson will take place. If the lesson will take place indoor or in class, that is where you indicate. Like the learners or the learning will take place in class and out of class. So you have to indicate this organization of learning, especially where it will take place. Then there is what we call lesson introduction. Under the lesson introduction, the facilitator should indicate how the lesson will start. How will you start the lesson? Whenever you enter the classroom, how do you introduce these learners to learning? How will you start? Starting of a lesson matters a lot, and that is what determines how successful you become at the end of it all. The way in which you start a given lesson determines how the lesson will go. It determines how the learners will enjoy, or whether they will enjoy the lesson or not. Your introduction must be very good. You can start by singing a given song that prepares them psychologically to whatever they are going to learn about. You can start a lesson by giving quizzes. You can start a lesson by singing a certain song that is related to the strand that learners are likely to learn, and several other ways that will make the lesson more captivating. So it's good for the facilitator to be more creative in this given area. This part is so crucial and so important that it will introduce the entire learning time, that given area. There is also what we call lesson development. Now, lesson development, this is now the lesson itself. This is where the learning starts. Under the lesson development, you talk of the steps that will be followed in this given lesson. Then there is step one. Step one, you must talk of what learners are guided to do, and the core competencies they are likely to achieve, the values and the PCIs that they are likely to achieve in that given step. Remember, the PCIs are the pertinent contemporary issues. I will mention some of these PCIs that we expect later on. Then you move to step two. Then you talk about learners are guided to demonstrate an activity or to do whatever that they are guided to do. And you also must remember the core competencies, the values, and PCIs that they will achieve in the second step. The same to the third step. You must also consider the core competencies, the values, and PCIs that they will achieve in the third step. After that, there is what we call extended activity. The extended activity, remember, is what we call the classwork. In the former curriculum, the extended activity was called assignment. It could be an assignment in class or classwork, or it could be in form of homework. But it is an activity that learners will do after the lesson, not during the lesson. They can do it during the lesson if there is time, but in most cases, it is done after the lesson. So learners will be guided to do a given activity under extended activity. Then there is conclusion. Under conclusion, here, the learners will be undertaken or will be taken through some recap. You can do a conclusion by taking the learners through a recap. You do a recap of the entire lesson by asking some quizzes or some questions so that the learners will be able to showcase their understanding in that given lesson. There is also reflection, and the part of reflection is filled by the facilitator to indicate the feedback or how the lesson was, whether the lesson was successful or not. So this part is filled after the lesson has been done. It is done, filled later. It's reflection. It is like a comment section. You comment on how the lesson was. Here you can talk of most learners were able to answer questions. You can talk of some learners who are not able to meet expectation. You can talk of 90% of the learners achieved the expectation or met the expectation. You can talk of 2 learners who are below expectation. There are several ways in which you can write your reflection so that that particular lesson, if there was a problem, it can be repeated or something else can be done. Something extra can be done so that the learners will be able to redo some activities for more understanding. It is good also that we should understand the difference between experience and an activity. Learning experiences and extended activity. There is a difference between the two. That it is good when you take learners through a given lesson, a lesson that they should have to show an experience or do an activity. Start with a real life experience before going back to the picture. Like now, if they have to go back to the picture in the textbooks, they have to start with real life experience. Like you can expose them to, if you are learning about directions, it is good that you take the learners out of a classroom so that they can be able to see the directions using the sunlight, where it is rises from and where it sets. So when they see and go through that particular experience, then you bring them to the textbook, that is the picture. Now they will be able to see and relate the two. So the learners can stand up and stretch their right and left hands. As they stretch those hands, as they tell what they can see at those directions, that is now in the picture, then they will do what they see in the picture displayed in the book. That will bring more live in the lesson. They will be able to learn more than when they are just given the textbooks. And then there is a difference between learning experience and activity, as I've just mentioned. For example, if the learner is going to the market, if you have told the learner to go to the market, going to the market is the experience that the learner has to experience going to the market. And doing shopping now, after going to the market, there's doing shopping. If this learner is given an opportunity after going to the market to do shopping, to visit a friend, and anything else that they can do apart from going, then this doing now, doing some shopping, visiting a friend, and doing other activities in the market is an activity. So that comes in the activity section. So, for example, it is good to understand all these things so that when you take learners through an experience, they will be able to understand and they will be able to learn more. It is good to note that it is the end that justifies the beginning. If the end is strong, then the beginning is justified. If the end is weak, the beginning is also known how it was. So it's good to understand this. Thank you so much for your time. Remember to subscribe.